Hey, garden nerds, we have a sponsor for this episode. It's the Heirloom Roses Company. The growing season is too short to waste on mediocre plants, which is why Heirloom Roses only produces robust, healthy, own root roses the way they were meant to grow. Grafted roses from big box stores are susceptible to winter damage and risk being taken over by rootstock suckers. But not own root roses. Own root roses will outlive and outshine grafted roses, resulting in stronger disease resistance, a longer lifespan, and stunning blooms that are always true to variety. Heirloom Roses wants you to invest in your garden and enjoy their superior disease-resistant roses backed by a 1-year guarantee. And with over 900 varieties to choose from, they have every rose you could want at heirloomroses.com. And June is the best time to plant. So take 20% off your order of roses with code NERD20, that's NERD20, now through October 31st, 2024. Let's make the world beautiful, one rose at a time, and find your next rose at Heirloom Roses. And find your next rose at heirloomroses.com. And don't forget to use the code NERD20 at checkout for 20% off your order. Now, on with the show. Welcome, everyone, to the Garden Nerd Tip of the Week podcast, where experts from around the world talk shop, share stories, and offer their favorite tip. I'm your host, Christy Wilhelmi. This week, my guest is Kyra Rude. She's the general manager at Rincon Vitova Insectaries, a company that produces and distributes insects and other organisms, supplies, and tools for the biological control of pests. And we're going to talk all about that and what that means in a minute. She does the pioneering work that uses natural enemies in ecological-based pest management. Kyra also has a degree in both biology and culinary arts. I can't wait to talk about this. Welcome to the podcast, Kyra.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm really glad we got a chance to catch up. I saw your name on the list of speakers at the Heirloom Expo, but I wasn't able to see your talk. So I'm really grateful that you were able to join me today. So let's get started. It's unique to find someone who grows beneficial insects for a living. It's kind of a niche market. When did you become fascinated with bugs and what they do in our ecosystem?
Well, I've always really loved insects. It was back in the 7th grade, actually, that my dad's a science teacher, he was a science teacher, and he took me on a field trip with their schools. I went to a different school, and we went down to Purdue University for a whole day-long workshop and seminar just geared to get young women interested in different science fields and career pathways. And I sat in on a seminar that was titled Something Something in Bugs, Who Done It? And it was all about forensic biology or forensic entomology. And I was hooked. It was amazing. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I ended up going into culinary arts after high school, and that was also a lot of fun, but wasn't really satisfying the nerd inside me. So I wanted to go back to school and do science. So I went back to do biology and chemistry. And it was in one of my graduate classes in the last 2 weeks of school that my professor said, you know, there are places in California that actually grow insects. That, got my attention. I really wasn't paying attention, to be honest. And so in between the break, it was a long class and we had a break in between. So I went down to the computer lab and I Googled insectary, because that was a magic word he'd used. And I found 5 different insectaries here in California who grew insects, and my world opened up. One of them, Rincon Vitova, actually had an internship that was closing that very day. So I sent a cover letter and I sent my resume. And then when I got home from class that evening, I was talking to my parents about it, and they said, Kai, California's 3 hours behind us. Why don't you call them? So I called and I talked to the owner, and then I talked to her husband, the co-owner, the next night. And yeah, they had me send a writing sample, and the rest is history. I drove out the day after graduation, and that was back in 2006.
Amazing. And you've been doing this work ever since.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I'm just going totally off book here, but the whole idea of culinary arts and biology. I
Yeah.
mean, did it ever occur to you to go into like molecular gastronomy or anything in that direction?
Oh, no, nothing like that. No, in fact, when I was in college, so I went to a kind of satellite campus of Purdue, and I was thinking about transferring down to main campus to focus on entomology instead of biology. And one of my advisors gave me some really terrible advice. He said, if you get a degree in entomology, you'll only be able to work for Orkin and other, pest killing, exterminating companies. So I naively listened to that and just stayed put, but it worked out. So,
It worked
yeah.
out.
My parents joke a lot about opening up a really strange food truck, but no, nothing
Well,
like that.
there are a lot of people out there who are exploring bugs as protein for, the next wave of solving the hunger solution. You have a book in your hands right now. Tell us about that.
Edible by Daniela Martin is about exactly that. And it is such a fabulous book. I rented it from the library initially, but then I loved it so much I had to buy it for myself. But my favorite part about the book is in the back, not only does she have recipes, but she also has simple, like 1-page rearing protocols, how you can rear a lot of these insects just in your living room, just in a small capacity, not anything like we're doing at insectary scale, but Edible by Daniela Martin. This is a fabulous book.
I love it. That's hilarious. Okay, so the big question is this whole notion of biological control. Can you briefly explain what that means when it comes to pests?
Yes. Simple, good bugs to eat the bad bugs.
Mhm.
So, a little bit more expanded upon that is back in the day, it was IPM, integrated pest management, using different tactics and techniques and tips and tricks and anything we can do to kind of tip the scale in our favor, and make it a little more inhospitable for our pests that we're trying to go after. Anymore, we've seen it kind of turn into integrated pesticide management where people are
Yeah.
trying to use the bugs and the chemicals. So things have shifted as they always do, but the kind of the baseline is using biology, so be it insects or nematodes or bacteria and fungi, things like that, good things to go after the pathogens and the pests that we're trying to control.
And that helps people to balance out their ecosystems. So they've got a balance of good bugs and bad bugs. So the bad bugs aren't completely taking over, right?
Does. When I first started, Ron, Jan's husband, the co-owner, they own this together, husband and wife team. It was Jan's dad that started the insectary back in the day.
Huh.
But so he came in and he kind of leaned on my desk and he said, our mission here is to teach people about biological pest control and how to use the good things to help solve their problems. We're not so much in this to sell the bugs. So our whole goal is to kind of work ourselves out of a customer base. If we've taught you correctly on how to do this yourself,
Yep.
and really, we like to tell people that it's challenging in the first year, especially if you're transitioning from something pretty extreme. But the more you do it and the more you keep at it, the easier it's going to be because this is what Mother Nature does. Mother Nature is going to take back over and keep it going for you.
Yeah. Now, I love learning about how things work behind the scenes. So, this is where my next question comes from. What does a day in the life of a bug or nematode farmer look like?
Well, depends on if you're in the administrative side up in the office or if you're actually in production or somewhere in between in the shipping department where you're gathering up the insects or taking the insects that are brought to you and packaging them physically in packages and putting them in boxes with ice packs and sending them out all across the country. So up in the office, it's a lot of phone calls and customer service and explaining these things and how it works and programs and how much square footage, all that kind of details. If you're in a production room, kind of depends on which insect system you're working with, but you start your morning and you gather up typically what's for sale for the day or what's going to be for sale from that day's production for tomorrow. And then you get started on working, kind of cleaning, feeding, taking care of the insects that are in there for the day's work and getting them ready for tomorrow's crew.
And how big is a cage for a bunch of insects?
Good question. So again, it kind of depends on which insect system we're talking about. So here at Rincon Vitova, we grow 3 different species of parasitic wasps, little parasitoids, fly parasites for natural fly control. They are the size of an ant with wings. So, you call somebody and you say, I'd like to sell you wasps to kill your flies. And, they look at you with wide eyes and think of yellow jackets and hornets, but no, they're very tiny. So if you're in those rooms, the cages are probably about 3 feet long by 1.5 feet wide, and they're the width of a 2x4, and they've got mesh on the top side and mesh on the bottom side, and the top side has a Velcro opening kind of in the corner, so it opens in an L shape so you can access what's in there without everything else flying out.
Right. That's my biggest concern.
So then in order to keep them down, we've got vacuum tables. So Deke, the founding entomologist that started our company back in the 50s, Everett Dietrich, he developed this insect vacuum called the D-Vac, and we sell them all over the world, in fact, to entomology departments, to big ag operations. But so we've got a lot of these D-Vac vacuums as a vacuum table. And then we've got a little mesh cotton bag on the inside and some like sifters that look like sieves that you're panning for gold, but much bigger mesh. And that's how we kind of separate the wasps from the parasitized pupae and keep everything separate and keep everything held down while we're trying to collect things.
That is fascinating to me. And you mentioned parasitic wasps. Those are my favorite because I love the idea that they poke holes in aphids and lay their young inside them. Yes. And I'm sure there's many different types of parasitic wasps. Those particularly are my favorites because they're fabulous. Now, I wish I could find it again, but there was an article a while ago that shared that many of the biological organisms and beneficial insects that we buy on the consumer level are dead by the time we get them. What should people know, before they're ordering these kinds of things online or getting from their nursery? What should people look out for a good product?
Well, a couple of things. One, hopefully you're purchasing from a reputable supplier, somebody who's been doing this for a while, somebody that just hasn't seen the trend and the greenwashing in the industry and tried to hop on the bandwagon. So there is an organization that exists for just this reason. It is called the Association of Natural Biocontrol Producers, ANBP.org. So the ANBP is our industry trade group, and it keeps track of, it has, members that join into it. And so, we keep in contact with Fish and Wildlife for importation reasons and permits and things like that. But it's on this page, this website, that you'll find a list of the reputable suppliers and the ones that have been vetted and the ones you can trust to be delivering you a product that will be alive when you get it. Hopefully that's part of their guarantee. That's most insectaries' guarantee, is live insects on delivery. Things happen with UPS. Not everything gets delivered in the day or the 2 days or the 3-day time frame that it needs to get delivered. Some things get delayed in transit just for circumstances beyond anyone's control. Things like that happen. Again, hopefully you're working with a reputable supplier such that you can call them and say, hey, my stuff didn't arrive well, there was a delay, whatever else the reason is, and they'll work with you for that. If you're buying things in store, I would caution you against that. A lot of the insects, a fair number of the insects just don't store well. They're not meant to be stuck in a fridge. They're not like books to sit on a shelf to be purchased whenever. They are live. So we do need to respect their life cycles and what they need and what they require. And some things from another perspective. So one of our suppliers from Canada, his big tagline is fresh is best. So certain insects like Incarcia formosa that people like to use for whitefly control, these insects, they're fine for transporting. They're fine once you get them. Some distributors will put them into cold storage, and then when you get them as the end user and you do your QC, your quality control, or you watch them hatch, they'll hatch wonderfully. But that cold storage, that brief period in suboptimal temperatures, has destroyed their searching ability. So they'll still hatch, you'll get an excellent hatch rate, but they no longer have that biological directive to seek out the whitefly, the whole reason they're there.
Interesting.
Similarly, a predatory mite that's on the market called Gallandromus occidentalis, the Western predatory mite, if it goes through a very short period of starvation, too long of storage in between when it's packaged and when you, the end user, are getting it, it will resorb its eggs and not be able to lay any more eggs for the duration of its life. So Details like this are pretty important, and some things aren't shelf stable. Now, there are plenty of nematode products that are perfectly shelf stable. They're mixed in with vermiculite, and it's a top dressing formulation that can sit there until you reconstitute it, and away they go. These are details that hopefully you're speaking to your supplier about, and hopefully you aren't just ordering up from some fly-by-night website on the internet. I would also watch out for big box stores. I mean, they do so many things. Jack of all trade is a master of none. Just be careful.
Yeah. I think I opened up a package of nematodes once, and it was very stinky. It smelled like kind of old shoes or something. Is that something to look out for? Big red flag?
Red flag. Yes, yes. So no, there shouldn't be strange smells coming off the, okay, all right, let me take that back. So the fly parasites, one of the materials they off gas is ammonia. So when you open up packages of fly parasites, yes, those smell. I remember one time when DHL was still a carrier, they brought back one of those steel drums to us, and they said, here's a return. What is being returned in a steel drum? And we got some flyers and we got the thing open, and it was a small, 5x5 package of our fly parasites. But they don't smell the best, and they do start to hatch and come out of the boxes sometimes for longer days in transit. But no, a lot of the things, the highly perishable things that must be going overnight, like your nematodes, your predatory mites and things like that, there should not be strong odor coming off of them.
Okay. And I know, I'm just thinking now, I'm realizing based on what you just said about the refrigeration, how that can change certain products or certain insects' ability to perform well. I know that, like, I've bought nematodes in the past, and it says you can store them in the fridge for up to 2 weeks. And that might have been part of the contributing problem. I don't know.
You can. Now, there should also be some clear-cut ways for you as the end user to do like a quick and dirty QC, quality control, once you get the product or once you're ready to use it, to see if what you're applying is even still alive. So somewhere within that anbp.org, I can even send you a direct link to it. There's a group up in Canada, the Vineland Research Group. They put out this wonderful publication about quality assurance in your biological control agents. And it's exactly that. It's a real friendly manual about how you can do a quick quality control when you get it, or it's got more in-depth methods for more scientific applications and so on and so forth. So
perfect. I will add that to the notes in the podcast. I happen to have a microscope, so I can check under a microscope for myself. But for those who don't, that would be a great resource. Okay, now the next question is really prompted by someone else who I've known who has really strong concerns about the idea of importing insects or microbes into an ecosystem. Have you ever run into problems with imported beneficials or microbes causing trouble or throwing an ecosystem out of whack, or like causing an invasive species problem?
That is a very good question, a very valid point. I personally haven't run into it. We do a pretty good, we Rincon Vitova, we, the industry, we, the country, do a pretty good job these days of keeping that stuff under wraps, in control, in check. My coworker, there's an interesting article she once read from way back when somebody introduced a harmless butterfly to an island, where turns out, in fact, the butterfly had 3 different viruses in its gut that did a lot of harm on.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so this stuff does happen.
Yeah.
And it's happened a lot throughout history. There was also a really interesting article I read right after 9/11. We had to take so many Border Patrol agents off of the USDA Border Patrol about watching for invasive species coming in, and put them into Homeland Security, that there was such a surge in different species that got in across our borders.
Oh boy.
So yeah, we definitely need to be paying attention to that. But in terms of the insects that you're buying from insectaries and what you're using for your gardening biological control levels, those have gone through rigorous quarantine. The most recent example I can think of is the situation that is, well, it's kind of everywhere now, but started in Florida. It's moving its way across the southern part of the United States and over here into California via Mexico, but the Asian citrus psyllid.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So Dr. Mark Hoddle down at the UC, University of California, he had taken a group of researchers and they went over to Pakistan and did some collections, and they brought back 12 or 17. It was a fairly large number of species based on the literature, the pre-literature studies they had done, and the sampling they had done in places where the citrusillid was known and had been captured. So they brought back a bunch of different species that they thought would be representative of a perfect parasite to introduce. And it stayed in the quarantine facility. And they go through a huge process of quarantining and keeping these things under tight surveillance to make sure it doesn't get out and wreak havoc in the ecosystem. So a fun story on the other side of that is we work with a gal in Kentucky. Entomology Solutions is her company. Idlewild Butterfly Farm, if you want to check her place out. She does this walkthrough butterfly tent. And then in the off season in October, she removes all the butterflies and fills it with spiders for Halloween. So super fun. Anyhow, so she's got the permits and the quarantine facilities at her location in Louisville that the USDA, when they get someone who's trying to smuggle insects in from other countries and trying to sell them on the black market, if they get confiscated, they will contact Blair and say, hey, you know, we've got this species of jewel tone jumping spiders. Can we keep them in your quarantine lab until, you know, they're no longer with us? So she gets some really, really interesting specimens and lets them live out their life in her quarantine facility so they don't wreak havoc in our ecosystem.
I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned the Asian citrusillid, there is a parasitoid for that.
Yes.
But it has, so far, I have not found a place where it is available to consumers. Do you sell it or know of a place?
We don't sell it. So that was the parasitoid that Mark Hoddle found. He and his crew found. That's the Tamarixia wasp.
Yes.
They found that. They brought it back. That was one of 2 species that they finally identified to be a good candidate for our environment. And they started doing very concentrated residential releases in certain areas of Los Angeles. Then they offered it up. So how that works is they have developed a rearing system for this insect, and now they're going to put it out there to us as consumers of insect rearing systems. And anybody in the commercial side of the industry who wants to purchase that system and start rearing it, have at it. So I believe it was Foothill Ag Research down in Corona, California, that bought that system. And they were growing the Tamarixia for a while for commercial sales, residential sales. I'm not sure if they're still rearing it, but I can send you their information as well.
I contacted I forget what organization it is that is tracking where the citrusillid is being found in California and where the citrusillid that is infected with the virus is being found, because there's not all citrusyllids are infected,
right,
or carriers. But I contacted them because I have a community garden up the street from me with more than 250 trees, many of which are citrus. And I was like, could you please come and release the parasitoid in our community garden? I think that would be really amazing. And they're like, we don't distribute to consumers. I'm like, come on. So I was angry about that, but I was hoping at some point that it would help, someone would, start distributing it a little more regionally, or at least more frequently for those of us who can't access the parasitoid ourselves. So yes, I would love that information. The other thing is, a friend of mine with her scientific partner, they did a study where they planted alyssum underneath a bunch of citrus trees. Exactly. She is clapping her hands, audience. And the alyssum attracted the right parasitoid to combat. It did a better job of combating Asian citrusillid, the huanglongbing, and all of that. It did a better job than any of the conventional methods that are being used right now to treat it. So that was a cool insight. And you seem to know a little bit about this.
I would love to speak to that. Yes, that is so wonderful. That is amazing. I love hearing stories out in the wild of this stuff working. So Dr. Joe Patt has done a lot of work on habitat and insectary flowers and the kinds of flowering plants that beneficial insects like and what draw them into, your farms and gardens and keep them here. Because let's just pause for a minute and talk about this. So we release beneficial insects. A lot of times we're releasing beneficials in their juvenile stage. Some are the adult stage that are doing the work for us, but a lot of times the adult stage isn't parasitic or predatory, but it needs nectar and pollen to stick around, to mature properly, to lay viable eggs, all these things. So if you have a monoculture, like so much of United States agriculture, you're not going to attract a lot of beneficial insects. So a lot of what we do is just talk and hammer the point of diverse flowering plantings here and there in nooks and crannies, on forgotten land, in patches underneath the mailbox, alongside the drive roads where the chain link fence is growing nothing but weeds. Flowering plants, because that's going to support all of our beneficial insects and our natives. Now, Joe Pat has done a lot of work on which insectary plants are the best ones, and they're the ones with wide open standing rooms, lots of teeny tiny little flowers, lots of tiny little umbels and nectaries that the insects can access. Alyssum is one of the ones that he has found being incredibly important in drawing in our teeny tiny flies and wasps that are going to help with the citrus psyllid. It is just a psyllid. There are lots of insects out there that are going to eat it. They just need to be reminded it's a psyllid, and they would love to eat it. So by not spraying some of these pesticides and planting some of these flowers, if you build it, they will come. Let's give them a chance.
Yes, fantastic. Now, or what is one of your favorite insects or organisms that you would like gardeners to know about?
Oh, man.
Hard to choose.
Where do I start? Well, the one that doesn't get enough attention is, everybody knows ladybugs, but the green lacewing. Everybody should meet and be familiar with the green lacewing. You probably have them in your garden. Look for long silk stalks or filaments with a teeny tiny ball egg on the end. That is a lacewing egg. You see them flying at dawn, at dusk. They're fantastic generalists. They're the cornerstone of so many biological programs. They're just wonderful.
I like them. And those are usually, although we may have to have a caveat about this, is that those, along with ladybugs, lacewings are often sold in Tupperware containers at the nursery in those refrigerators. How do they hold up in that setting?
Good question. I guess it kind of depends on how the nursery is handling them when they receive them. So the egg stage can take a little bit of storage. The eggs need a couple of days to hatch. So here's a good caveat for lacewing being one of the best and easiest things for users in the garden. If you're using the lacewing eggs, you got to be careful without just tossing out the fresh green eggs, because that is a free lunch to predators or ants or earwigs or ground beetles or even Aureus, the minute pirate bug. Anybody that goes after insects, they're going to go after eggs because it's low-hanging fruit. You don't have to chase it. So when you're using lacewing eggs specifically, you need to hang on to them for a day or two or three, sometimes depending on your temperature, until you start to see one or two hatched into that teeny tiny little alligator shaped larva that they look like. Then everybody else is close to hatching. And what we're just trying to minimize that vulnerable egg stage, that susceptible stage out in the garden. So if you see the eggs in a garden center, I would kind of look at them. If they're a bright kind of limey green, they're very, very fresh eggs and they're a couple of days out from hatching. If they're kind of a dull gray green, they're very close to hatching. If they're white, you're probably looking at empty egg shells and the larvae have already hatched and walked somewhere else. Consuming what's else is in that package.
Okay.
Adults, I hope they're not selling in garden stores. Larvae is really tricky because they need to be fed. Otherwise, they're going to just, desiccate and die.
Yeah, I think I've seen them. Well, I've never bought them. I've only bought ladybugs in a tub, but that and worms for like the worm bin. But I've seen them. I think they've come in little like cocoony type things that you hang out or something, and then they release over time. I'm not sure. I am not speaking from experience when I talk about lacewing eggs, but I do have pictures of that little filament with the egg on the end of it, and they're sitting right on top of a celery plant that I'd let go to flower because it's an umbelliferae. Mm-hmm. And just like, dill, fennel, celery, cilantro, parsley, those all will be host plants for those insects, which it's so exciting to find one. Like, woohoo, lacewing. Yeah. Really cool. All right. Well, it is tip time. Do you have a favorite tip you'd like to share with the Garden Nerd audience?
Oh boy, we love DIY tips. So Does it have to be one? Can I give two?
Yes, you can give two.
Okay. Tip number one, ant suppression. Anything you can do to suppress your ants is really going to help against all your honeydew producing insects, your aphids, your whitefly, your scale, your mealybugs, some thrips, some psyllids. We could go on. So we do a homemade boric acid based syrup. So boric acid and sugar water. So it's going to be 1 cup sugar, 2 cups water, 2 teaspoons of boric acid, not more. If they taste that you're using more, they will drop alarm pheromones around your bait station, warning everyone it's poison and to stay away. Now, for a DIY bait station, you can use an old cottage cheese cup, anything like that. And you want twigs, sticks, leaves, some kind of bridge material sticking down into that cup so they can get in and get out with the bait. This is a bait station. This is not a trap. You want the ants to get in and get the bait and take it back to the colony. We are Trojan horsing them. The way you get rid of ants is by feeding this low-level toxicant to the whole colony. So if you see dead ants in or around your bait station, we need to troubleshoot it. This is a bait station, not a trap. Okay, tip number 2, worm castings. For all of those of you that fight whitefly on your hibiscus and your roses and anything else, worm castings are an excellent deterrent for those whitefly. There are enzymes plus other things in worm castings, but specifically the enzymes in the worm castings make it really, really hard for the whitefly to feed on your plants. So one simple thing you can do is go to any big box store and get a bag of worm castings. While you're there, get an old pantyhose and do about 1 cup of worm castings per gallon. And all you're going to do is massage that paint strainer bag inside your bucket of water. You could do that for a few minutes. You could let it steep for a half hour. And so you're going to transfer all those good enzymes to your water. And then you can foliar spray the plants that you have the troubles with the whitefly, or you can drench it right into the soil and help support your plants that way.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I've been touting the benefits of worm castings as a pest control for years. And it's just so nice to hear someone else sharing this news. Worm castings, it's the chitinase. It's the chitinase that does the trick. Very, very cool. Excellent. Well, these are great tips, Kyra. Thank you so much for these tips and everything else we talked about today, and for being a guest on the Gardenerd Tip of the Week podcast. Where can people find you?
We are at rinconvitova.com. It's a pretty old-fashioned website, so you're eventually going to email me or call me on the telephone. The email to get a hold of us is orderdesk@rinconvitova.com. That's RINCONVITOVA.com. Or our telephone number is 800-248-2847, which is 800-248-BUGS.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
All right, garden nerds, you'll find a link to Kyra's workplace, Rincon Vitova, this week at Gardenerd.com. We'll also share a link to their newsletter and blog so you can learn more about sustainable pest management. That's it for this week. Subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen. Visit us for tons of free gardening information at Gardenerd.com. Special thanks to our sponsor, Heirloom Roses, for supporting this episode. You'll find us on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter under Gardenerd1, on Facebook as Gardenerd.com, and of course, our Gardenerd YouTube channel. Happy gardening!